Oh boy, it's finally time to cover the giant that all pre-med students stress about, the MCAT. In this video, we'll do an overview of the testing process, how it works, and how it gets graded. The MCAT is a standardized multiple choice exam that tests students on a number of things, but most importantly, it tests their ability to critically think and adapt new information, as well as gauge their understanding of natural, social, and behavioral sciences. There are 4 distinct sections on the MCAT: chemistry, critical analysis and reasoning, biology, and psychology. If you want to learn more about each specific section on the test and what kinds of questions there will be, check out the other video on test material where I break down each section. You will also be given periodic breaks throughout the test, as you can see, with a 10-minute break after the first and third sections, while you get a 30-minute break to eat lunch halfway through the exam. The MCAT is scored on a scale with 472 being the lowest score you can get and 528 being the highest. Each section will have its own score as well, so when you get your grade back, you will be able to see which sections you performed well on. Something you might not be used to, however, is taking a test that's graded relatively, meaning the MCAT is one giant competition between you and your peers. If I get the highest grade, a 528, that does not mean that all the questions I got were right, it just means I did better than 99% of other people that took the test. Another example is if I score a 510 on one test, it's very possible that I could get a 508 or a 512 on the next test, even if I get the same exact number of questions right. The scores will fluctuate from test to test based on how the average student does, since not each test will be the same, and some will inevitably be easier than others. The benefit of this is if you are unlucky and feel like you got a super hard test when you took it, chances are others might feel the same. It's all relative to the other people taking it, not the absolute score. Anyways, the test itself will take you around 7.5 hours if you don't finish early. All the MCATs start at 8 a.m. whatever your local time is, but they will always ask you to get there 30 minutes early so that they can get you checked in and situated before it begins. Finally, taking the MCAT will cost you around $335 as of now, but that price may fluctuate from year to year, so just keep your eye on it. Keeping that in mind, the cost of having to take the test might be a factor to consider when you are trying to decide if you should take the test again. On the right side of the screen, you can see the calendar year with all of the test days for 2024. Each testing day has a corresponding day that the results will be released on at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so just keep that in mind as well. The link I have provided in this video will guide you to this page where you can see the test days regardless of what year it is. And that's important because you need to know how to register for the test. If you navigate to the AAMC website, which as I have explained in other videos is the organization that runs the MCAT, open up the page about taking the MCAT. On the right side of your screen, you will see this option to register for the MCAT. It will take you to another screen where you will see a bunch of information about your account with AAMC, but the top right box will have a button to start the exam registration. Once you click that, you will be able to start putting in all of your personal information and finding a test date that works for you. Based on where you are located, the registration process will try and direct you to local test centers as best it can. However, I will urge you to try and register for the MCAT as early as possible. There are a limited number of spots per day at each testing site, so if you want to ensure that you can take it somewhere close by on the day that you're looking for, the earlier you sign up, the better. Some interesting testing rules you may not have been aware of, but there is actually a limit to how many times you can take the test. You are limited to taking it only 3 times in a given year and 4 times over 2 consecutive years. So if you decide to take the MCAT 3 times this calendar year, you will only get to take it once next year. Finally, you are only allowed to take it up to 7 times during your lifetime, meaning there is no 8th attempt. Once you take the test a 7th time, that is all you are allowed, but hopefully you won't have to take it nearly that many times. Another important thing to know about taking the test multiple times is that medical schools will be able to see each attempt and the score that you got. You won't get to just pick your best score and send that one on your application. You will have to report all of the scores you have received. That can work towards your benefit or it could hinder you. If you got an average score and want to try again, It will look good if you're able to improve upon the score on the next test, but if you get unlucky and get a harder test and you don't do as well on it, you might actually hurt your application. There is a lot of strategy that goes into deciding whether or not to take the test again, and I talk about that more in the video on should I take it again. One thing I do want to mention here is the option to void your exam score. On test day, right before you hit the final submit button, it will ask you if you want to void your score. If you do, all record of you taking that test will be dropped, and it will be as if you never took it, which might be a good thing if you feel that you did poorly. However, you will not get to see the actual score before voiding it, so if you think you did poorly but you actually got a decent score, it will have all been for nothing. So please, please, please think carefully when given this option at the end of the test. I do want to talk more about how the test is graded, since it is kind of different than what you might be used to. So as a reminder, everything is graded on a relative scale, and like I said, even if you answer the same number of questions right, your score might change from test to test depending on how everyone else did. I will actually show you the results from my own test so that you can get an idea of what the grading system looks like and what you will see when you get your grade back. So if you go into AAMC and click on where it says Get Your Test Scores, you will get to see a page with all of your past test dates and results. When you click on that, something like this will come up. So if you look at this report, you can see here that my score was a 512, which placed me in the 83rd percentile among the other students that took the test. You can also see the individual scores and percentiles for each section. You might be wondering what this little symbol is though. Remember how I said the score might change from test to test based on how everyone else did? Well, this symbol is a way for the graders to say that they are certain that my absolute score, regardless of how others did, are within the range it gives me. So for my chemistry section, I probably scored between a 128 and 130 regardless of how others did, and if I were to take the test again, it would fall somewhere in that range. Now, schools don't really look at that per se, it's more for your reference, just so you know the range that your actual score fell into. Schools will only look at the percentile or relative score for each test, so the 512 or the 83rd percentile is all they would look at. However, schools absolutely do see the scores of the individual sections, and I talk about which sections are more important to schools in the video on test materials. But how do you get the scores to the schools that you even applied to? Well, lucky for you, most of them get done automatically. Since the MCAT is run by the AAMC, and a lot of the medical schools you apply to will be through the AMCAS system, which is also run by the AAMC, any schools you apply to through AMCAS will automatically get your scores electronically. But what if you use a different application service? What if you're a Texas resident applying through TMDSAS, for instance? Well, if you go back to where it says Get Your Test Scores on the AAMC website, you should see in the top right corner a drop-down menu for My Reports. If you click on where it says Send Scores Electronically, it will take you to a page where you can type in whatever institution or program you would like to send your score to. If you start to type out Texas Medical and Dental Schools Application Service, you should see it pop up as an option. You will not be able to type in acronyms here, so make sure you know the full name of whatever you are trying to send your score to. You will only need to send your scores to the application service itself and not the individual schools that you apply to. Just as a reminder, if you are applying to schools through AMCAS, you will not, and I repeat, will not have to search for any individual schools using this method. It is all done automatically through AMCAS. So now that you know how the test works, I guess all that's left for you is to start preparing if you haven't already. My next video will talk all about how to prepare for the scary thing and go over things like specific prep programs, self-study, what subjects to focus on, resources you can use, and many other things.